Hello everyone, welcome to today's story full of scandals, but before the scandal, before the Coldplay concert, before the internet exploded with speculation, betrayal, and silence, there was just a man named Andy Byron. A man known not for controversy, but for compassion. Andy Byron didn't always live in the limelight. He was once just a small-town boy from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, a town of cornfields, calm mornings, and people who knew your name even if you'd only met once. Raised in a working-class home by a high school math teacher and a nurse, Andy learned early the importance of two things: resilience and kindness. He wasn't the smartest kid in his class, but he was, as teachers recalled, the one who stayed after to help someone else understand the assignment. Even in high school, he was known more for asking how you were doing than bragging about his test scores. At age 17, tragedy struck. His father, Mark Byron, died of a sudden heart attack while coaching the school's junior varsity basketball team. It was Andy who found him in the gym, still holding the clipboard. That moment shaped him. He put his head down, graduated with honors, and went on to study computer science at the University of Michigan. While many around him raced to Silicon Valley, Andy stayed grounded. After graduation, he joined a small startup in Indiana, where he refused a higher-paying job just because they treated their interns like robots. Over the years, Andy moved through the tech world not with brashness, but humility. At 29, he became a senior data strategist. At 31, he launched his own startup, which failed. But it was during that failure that people started noticing something else about him. His instinct to lift others up, even when he was falling. One ex-colleague said, "Andy couldn't save the company, but he made sure every employee got a recommendation. He even paid 2 people out of pocket for 1 more month's rent." His quiet generosity earned him admiration from those who worked with him, and eventually recognition from companies who believed in the man more than the resume. That's how Astronomer found him. By 2020, Andy Byron was named CEO of Astronomer, a growing data analytics company. The board's decision wasn't just based on numbers, but his ability to connect with people. Investors liked his spreadsheets. Employees loved his sincerity. Under Andy, Astronomer changed. He introduced something unheard of in data tech: Mental Health Mondays. A day each month where employees could sign off early, attend company-paid therapy sessions, or just be with their families, no questions asked. He championed diversity, expanded parental leave, and insisted that new hires from non-traditional backgrounds be considered before resumes from Ivy Leagues. One young analyst, Dana Reyes, recalled the time her child fell sick during a crucial client meeting. Andy canceled his own presentation, took over hers, and sent her home with a company Uber and dinner paid for. She never forgot it. But Andy didn't stop there. He launched the Byron Tech Fund, a small initiative using 5% of his annual bonus to invest in underfunded Black and women-led startups. By 2023, that fund had helped launch 3 sustainable tech companies, each one focused on community improvement, not just profit. He also partnered with local nonprofits, donating over $250,000 over 4 years to STEM scholarships and high school coding boot camps. On weekends, he gave free guest lectures at community colleges across the Midwest. And then there was his personal kindness, never publicized. He once helped an intern whose visa had expired get pro bono legal support. He funded the funeral of a security guard's mother. He delivered food to employees' homes during the pandemic, sometimes in person wearing a mask and jeans, not a suit. Andy Byron wasn't a saint, but to those who worked with him, he felt close. "He made you feel seen," said one former engineer. "Even when the company was growing fast, he never acted like he was above you. He was also a husband." In 2017, he married Megan Kerrigan, a sharp-minded entrepreneur and wellness coach. The two were described as a power couple with empathy. Megan often spoke about Andy's humility, his terrible cooking, and his obsession with spreadsheets. Their photos, now removed from social media, once showed vacations, charity runs, and cozy nights at home. From the outside looking in, Andy Byron was a leader, a giver, and a deeply grounded man. Even those who now condemn him remember who he once was, which is what made the scandal so heartbreaking. Because the man who stood on stage at company retreats telling people, "Your integrity is your greatest asset," would later be the subject of memes, mockery, and mass online outrage. And yet, people still struggle to reconcile two versions of Andy. How could a man who helped so many fall so far? The answer, perhaps, lies not in black and white definitions of good and evil, but in the gray zones where stress, loss, and unhealed grief blur judgment. Soon enough, we'll peel back the layers, the corporate wins, the personal wounds, the ghost of a tragedy 5 years ago, and the slow unraveling that ended in a single moment, a kiss caught on camera at a concert. But before the mistake, before the headlines, there was a man who tried, maybe too hard, to be everything to everyone. And in trying to save others, he may have forgotten how to save himself. Andy's leadership in turning astronomer into a major player in analytics. Innovative projects he pushed, like real-time consumer forecasting. His role in diversifying hiring, pushing for better mental health benefits, and mentoring women in tech. Testimonies from employees who once called him the most emotionally intelligent boss they ever had. Please don't forget to like, comment, and share if you believe in the power of words and silence. This is where the story begins to twist. Before the headlines and the kiss cam, Andy Byron was known as one of the most respected minds in data technology. But it wasn't just his brain that made him different, it was his vision for how tech could serve people. When Andy Byron took over as CEO of Astronomer, the company was still fighting to prove itself in the crowded world of data analytics. It was 2020 and the tech world was shifting. People wanted results, not just from numbers but from meaning. Andy understood this better than most. At the time, Astronomer was providing behind-the-scenes pipeline software, a necessary but unglamorous part of the tech stack. Investors liked the idea. But users? Most had never heard of it. Andy's first move was simple but revolutionary: make data human again. He called an all-hands meeting the first week and wrote one sentence on a whiteboard. Data is just people, counted. That became the heart of everything he did. He hired not just engineers and coders, but educators, behavior analysts, and journalists. His philosophy: if you can't explain the value of your data to your grandmother, you don't understand it yourself. Under Andy, Astronomer began building dashboards and interfaces that looked more like news sites than spreadsheets. He believed that design mattered. Storytelling mattered. Truth mattered. He launched Astronomer Stream, a real-time customer behavior tracking tool that helped small businesses predict trends like local food surges, seasonal shopping spikes, and even traffic slowdowns. But he didn't sell it to Fortune 500 companies first. He gave it to nonprofits, free of charge. One story made its way through internal Slack chats. A food bank in Ohio used Astronomer's forecasting tool to cut food waste by 40% and serve over 6,000 more families that winter. Andy had reached out personally after reading about them in a small blog. But it wasn't just tech. It was the culture he built inside the company. He banned performance review rankings, calling them a lazy way to kill creativity. He restructured pay transparency. Interns and entry-level staff knew exactly how promotions worked. Office politics didn't matter, performance and impact did. He created a people council made up of rotating team members from every department, not just HR. Every month, that council met with Andy to review policies, raise complaints, or suggest changes. It wasn't PR. He took their advice. Sometimes immediately. One junior engineer suggested a revision to the parental leave policy after her sister gave birth prematurely. 2 weeks later, Andy personally announced the new Family First leave system, including flexible time for adoption, caregiving, and even pet emergencies. It stunned people. In tech, CEOs didn't listen that fast. But Andy did. His leadership style was often described as empathetic but exact. He didn't tolerate laziness, but he also didn't tolerate cruelty. "I don't care how smart you are," he once said, "if you make someone feel small to feel powerful, you don't belong here." He implemented what some jokingly called the decency clause, a company-wide standard for respect, transparency, and emotional awareness. More than once, top-performing engineers were let go not because of output, but because they lacked basic emotional intelligence. Andy's astronomer began to look different from other data firms, not just in product but in principle. He welcomed feedback, encouraged contradiction, promoted the underdog. But not everyone believed in his approach. Behind closed doors, some executives, especially legacy investors, felt Andy was too soft, too idealistic. He was changing too much too fast. They feared he cared more about culture than capital. But the numbers didn't lie. By mid-2023, under Andy's direction, Astronomer tripled its valuation, expanded into Europe, and struck key partnerships with Salesforce, IBM, and the U.S. Department of Energy. Still, Andy didn't change. Even as the company hit unicorn status, he kept working in an open cubicle beside his team. He walked the office barefoot on Fridays. He ate lunch with the newest interns. Once, after being praised for a keynote speech, he gave credit to the writer who helped prepare his notes, in front of 1,000 people. It was this kind of humility that made people believe in him. And more than that, want to work for him. But perhaps the most telling example of Andy's leadership wasn't in product or policy. It was in silence. In early 2022, a major cyber attack hit a competitor in the same data space. While other CEOs issued veiled press releases taking advantage of the chaos, Andy released just one tweet. "We stand with our friends at Lytix. Competition should never come at the cost of safety. We've offered assistance where needed." That tweet was reposted over 45,000 times, not just by professionals but by people outside of tech who simply respected the rare mix of kindness and professionalism. But even legends have limits. As Andy's reputation grew, so did his responsibilities. Speaking tours, partnership meetings, advisory boards, internal town halls. The calendar never ended. Colleagues began to notice. Andy looked tired. He'd stare off longer in meetings. His emails got shorter. He stopped attending volunteer days and Friday lunches. Some assumed it was burnout. What no one knew at the time was that a deeper pain had never fully healed, a tragedy that changed him 5 years ago. A wound no job, no success, and no good intention could fully cover. That part of the story, the heartbreak that shaped the man behind the mission, would come next. But for now, it was undeniable. Andy Byron built a company that worked differently. And he did it not through power, but through people. Before the fame, there was the night that shattered Andy Byron's world. A night he never spoke about publicly, but one that quietly changed everything. The story of Andy Byron isn't just about data or corporate culture. To understand who he truly was, and why everything later spiraled so fast, we have to go back to the year 2020. It was a Sunday night in September. Andy's younger brother, Eli Byron, had just left a friend's birthday dinner in Chicago. He was 27, smart, charismatic, a grad student studying environmental engineering. Eli had dreams of launching a nonprofit that would turn agricultural waste into fuel for rural towns in Africa. But he never made it home. On the corner of South Halsted and West 35th, a speeding SUV ran a red light. Witnesses later said the vehicle was going at least 80 miles an hour. The impact was instant. Eli's car was hit from the side, spinning into a telephone pole before bursting into flames. He died before responders arrived. The driver, a 19-year-old off-duty security guard, survived with minor injuries. He was drunk. His blood alcohol level was nearly 3 times the legal limit. Andy received the call at 2:41 a.m. He was in California for a conference. The next flight wasn't until morning. What followed was a period those close to him later described as unrecognizable. Andy vanished from all social channels. Meetings were canceled. His assistant cleared his calendar indefinitely. For nearly 2 months, no one from Astronomer saw him. But behind the scenes, Andy wasn't just grieving, he was breaking. Eli had been more than a brother. He was Andy's anchor. The one who kept him grounded, who once talked him out of quitting tech altogether. They spoke daily, shared playlists, swapped startup ideas, and even vacationed together. Andy once told a colleague, "If I'm the engine, Eli's the fuel." Without him, Andy was adrift. He moved back to Chicago temporarily, staying at their parents' house. He handled Eli's funeral arrangements personally, chose the casket, designed the gravestone, paid for everything. Quietly. No press release. No statement. Just silence. But then, slowly something changed. Just weeks after the funeral, Andy made a private donation to the Victims of DUI Foundation. Then another, this time to a local grief counseling center. Then to 3 trauma clinics, 2 college scholarships, and a startup that provided therapy access for students. All in Eli's name. He didn't just write checks, he got involved. Sat on planning committees. Funded app development. Met with other families who'd lost loved ones in drunk driving crashes. Some said he was trying to stay busy. Others saw something deeper. He wasn't just grieving, one friend said. He was trying to turn pain into purpose. By the time Andy returned to Astronomer in January 2021, he looked different. Thinner. Quieter. Focused in a way that felt haunted. He walked into the office, stood in front of his entire staff and said 5 words. Grief changes what you value. Then he handed the microphone to an HR rep, and the company announced its most ambitious program yet. Astronomer Care, a mental wellness and trauma recovery initiative available to every employee, partner, and intern. 24/7 counseling, paid grief leave, flexible work weeks, and full support for therapy, no questions asked. It was the most generous wellness policy in the company's history. And it didn't come from a consulting firm. It came from loss. Andy also began speaking, quietly off camera, to other CEOs. He urged them to implement similar policies. Some listened. Some didn't. But internally his team noticed a shift. He became more protective, more thoughtful. He asked his VPs not just about metrics but about their marriages, their kids, their sleep. He promoted leaders who led with empathy, not just logic. One VP was shocked when Andy remembered the name of her son's school, months after a passing conversation. The company had grown, but Andy had grown even more. And yet, some wounds don't heal. They just fade beneath the surface. In private moments, Andy still struggled. He once arrived late to an executive retreat, eyes red, saying he'd visited someone important. It wasn't until later that staff realized the retreat was only 5 miles from Eli's grave. Another time, Andy missed a scheduled board meeting. When pressed, he admitted he'd spent the morning attending a DUI victim's trial, someone he'd never even met but had read about. He was chasing closure in a world that rarely gives it. 5 years later, people would still whisper about how Eli's death had changed him. He never fully came back, one senior engineer said. He gave everything he had to others, maybe because he didn't know how to fix himself. And that's where things become complicated. Because for all his goodness, all his leadership and giving and vision, Andy Byron was still human, still hurting. And sometimes when grief isn't dealt with, when it's buried beneath work and charity and ambition, it has a way of finding its way out. In mistakes, in lapses, in longing for comfort, for escape, or even for someone who simply understands. Which brings us to a woman named Kristin Cabot. A friendship that became something more. And a night at a Coldplay concert that would set the internet on fire. But to truly understand how it happened, and why, we must look closer at the moments Andy himself tried to forget. For 3 years, Andy Byron looked like he had it all under control. a tech visionary, a grief survivor, a role model. But behind every perfect picture, there's a frame no one sees, until it's caught on camera. By 2023, Andy Byron had rebuilt himself, at least on the surface. He was back in the media, giving TED-style keynotes on innovation. Astronomer was thriving. Staff retention was at an all-time high. Investors loved him. Industry panels booked him months in advance. But insiders noticed a change in his rhythm. Late meetings started to be canceled more frequently. Andy would disappear on Fridays. No one knew where. Long walks during office hours became common. He seemed distracted. And then there was Kristin Cabot. She was bright, sharp, charismatic. The company's youngest senior data strategist. Just 29, she'd earned a reputation for solving client problems faster than anyone else in the room. She joined Astronomer in 2022, handpicked from a competing firm in Seattle. To the outside world, they were just colleagues. To the inside world, whispers were growing. Kristin and Andy's connection started professionally. Late-night brainstorms, emergency fixes, weekend coding sprints. She was often the only one willing to stay after hours, and Andy noticed. "She gets it," he told a colleague once. "She works the way I used to." Soon they were always seen together. Not inappropriately, just frequently. Coffee runs. Strategy lunches. Elevator rides that went a little too quiet when someone entered. No hand-holding. No physicality. But the body language, the energy, was unmistakable. Some employees raised questions. Others looked the other way. It wasn't forbidden. Kristin wasn't a direct report. But it didn't feel normal. Still, nothing could have prepared them for what happened next. It was May 6, 2024, the Coldplay tour stop in San Francisco. Astronomer's board had gifted Andy a VIP experience for his birthday. It was meant to be a quiet night, good music, a thank you gesture. He invited a small group of senior staff. Kristin was among them. By 8:47 p.m., they were in their seats, second row left wing of the stage. The lights dimmed. Music swelled. Coldplay's Fix You began to play. And then the venue's kiss cam started rolling. It's unclear what happened first. The accidental pause on Andy and Kristin, or Kristin leaning in. But the screen caught it. The crowd saw it. The briefest kiss, not full, not dramatic, but unmistakable. What's certain is this. Someone took a video of the screen. And 17 minutes later, that video hit Twitter. By 11 p.m. it had gone viral. Is that Andy Byron? Wait, isn't he married? That's his employee? Bro, not at a Coldplay concert, loudly crying face, loudly crying face, loudly crying face. The hashtag started. Hashtag Byron exposed. Hashtag Tech Scandal 2024. Hashtag KissCamChaos. Within 24 hours, the video had over 2.5 million views. Meme pages ran with it. Satirical tech blogs dubbed it Startup Gate. Even gossip sites that never covered business started digging into Andy's past. The narrative exploded. But it wasn't just about the kiss. It was what it represented. People felt betrayed, not just professionally but emotionally. This was the man who'd preached ethics, who'd cried on stage about his brother, who funded mental health for employees. And now, this? Megan Byron, Andy's wife of 12 years, made no public comment. But her social media bio changed from wife, mother, advocate, to just advocate. She unfollowed Andy within days. Friends say she moved out temporarily, taking their 9-year-old daughter to her parents' lake house in Wisconsin. Back at Astronomer, things were spiraling. Kristin was put on immediate leave, pending internal review. Andy was asked to step away from operations. Board members were furious, especially after discovering texts, archived in the company's Slack, showing months of personal messages between the two. Some were flirty. Some were deeply emotional. "You understand me better than anyone," one message read. "Wish we could just disappear sometimes," another said. Employees started coming forward. Some claimed they'd noticed favoritism. Others said they'd warned HR months ago, but were told there's no policy violation. One former engineer even wrote a Medium post titled, "The Byron Illusion," detailing how she'd once admired him, only to feel betrayed by what he'd become. Investors began pulling out of a pending Series C funding round. The company's valuation dropped by $120 million in 2 weeks. And Andy? He didn't say much. Not at first. He issued a generic statement. "I made mistakes in judgment. I'm stepping back to allow space for accountability and healing." No press conference. No apology tour. Just silence. The same silence he once used after his brother's death. Some believe Andy never fully recovered from his grief, and that Kristin simply became a form of emotional rescue. Others think it was pure ego, power, proximity, entitlement, and yet others, a small, quieter group, still defend him. "He's not evil," one former VP said. "He was just broken, and tired of pretending he wasn't." Regardless of motive, the fallout was real. By July 2024, Andy had resigned as CEO. Kristin relocated to Denver. Megan filed for divorce. And Astronomer Incorporated began the long process of rebranding its leadership culture. But the question lingers. Can a man who once saved so many from burnout, breakdown, and despair ever save himself? Or was the Coldplay kiss not the beginning of a scandal, but the final symptom of a slow, silent collapse? In the end, there was no press conference, no final tweet, no dramatic goodbye, just an inbox auto-reply that read, "Andy Byron is no longer with the company." The day Andy Byron officially resigned, Astronomer's internal servers crashed. Not from any cyber attack, but from the sheer number of Slack messages, staff logins, and HR emails all flooding the system at once. Employees wanted answers. Reporters wanted a comment. And the public? They wanted closure. But Andy gave none. He disappeared. No interviews. No statements. Just a forwarded resignation letter sent through his legal counsel. "I am stepping down from all roles effective immediately. I take full accountability for the disruption caused to Astronomer, its staff, and the trust placed in me. I ask for space as I reflect and repair." There were no bold fonts. No excuses. Just silence. The same silence that had followed him ever since that night at the Coldplay concert. In the weeks after, Astronomer Incorporated scrambled to restore its image. They appointed an interim CEO, a former COO named Julian Thames, who immediately launched a full culture audit. New HR policies were installed. Company communication guidelines were revised. A quiet hiring freeze followed. Some staff were relieved. Others were still angry. A few simply quit. The company's board members gave brief interviews about leadership accountability and ethical recalibration, but avoided mentioning Andy's name directly. It was as if the man who once built the company's heartbeat had become its ghost. Meanwhile, Megan Byron filed for divorce on August 2, 2024, exactly 87 days after the scandal broke. Her lawyer released a single-line press statement. Mrs. Byron requests privacy as she and her daughter transition to a new chapter of life. She never spoke to the press. Never posted a public update. Her Instagram, once full of cozy family photos and vacation snapshots, went blank. Andy never contested the divorce. He signed the papers quietly. Their assets were split cleanly. The house went to Megan, while Andy kept a small equity package and a lakeside cabin in Montana. The daughter, now 10, would live full-time with Megan, with occasional supervised visits, granted upon request. But the real damage wasn't in the financials. It was in the reputation. Andy Byron was once invited to keynote conferences. Now he was removed from event posters without explanation. He used to appear on podcasts. Now, past episodes were taken down for brand consistency. Books he was writing, one tentatively titled Empathy at Scale, were quietly dropped by the publisher. He became a ghost in his own industry. 6 months later, someone spotted him in a remote cafe outside Missoula, Montana. Longer hair. No glasses. A flannel shirt. Alone. A fan approached timidly, unsure what to say. Andy nodded once. Smiled faintly. "Don't believe everything you read," he said. "But also don't excuse it either." That was it. He paid for his black coffee, tipped generously, and walked out into the cold. Back in the digital world, the conversation had shifted. Some YouTube channels ran exposés. The Andy Byron Files, How a Tech Hero Fell. Kiss Cams and Corporate Scandals. Why Astronomer Almost Collapsed Overnight. Each one pulling in millions of views. Your channel, Daily Crime Discoveries, could easily lead the next wave. Meanwhile, the Twitter mob eventually moved on. New scandals replaced old ones. The outrage thinned. But for those who knew Andy, the memory lingered. In private industry circles, debate grew louder. Some said no, that boundaries were broken, trust was lost, and influence misused. Others argued that his past efforts, his mentorship, his charitable donations, his leadership through tragedy, still mattered. That one moral failure shouldn't erase a lifetime of good. But Andy never weighed in. He refused all offers for redemption tours, speaking gigs, or even apology platforms. He didn't sue. He didn't fight back. He simply let the storm pass. One former employee, writing anonymously, said it best. "Andy Byron taught me everything I know about leadership. But I also learned from his downfall. Leadership without discipline is a facade. And the higher you rise, the deeper your secrets echo when they fall." Today, Andy remains a true legend to me. No LinkedIn updates. No press activity. No new company registered under his name. Some say he's teaching coding to teenagers at a local youth center. Others believe he's working on a memoir, one that may or may not ever be published. Megan has since relaunched her career, now leading a nonprofit that supports spouses of public figures through public humiliation. Kristin? Her location is unknown. Some say she moved abroad. Others say she's rebranded under a different name. The story of Andy Byron is not just a scandal. It's a warning. A reminder that even the most outwardly composed, morally upright, seemingly invincible leaders are still human, flawed, fragile, and capable of colossal collapse. One mistake doesn't erase a legacy, but it can redefine it. What would you do if your entire life changed in 17 seconds? Always be carefully in every day of your life. Subscribe for more gripping narratives from Daily Crime Discoveries. If this story of strength, pride, and quiet heroism moved you, please don't scroll away just yet. Like this video, it shows YouTube this story mattered. Share it with someone who may need a reminder that their pain has purpose. Comment below. What legacy would you want to leave behind? Your voice matters. Your story matters. And your support means everything to this channel. We're more than just viewers. We are a community that remembers, reflects, and respects the untold. This is Daily Crime Discoveries, where truth finds a voice, and heroes never fade. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay proud, and keep the fire burning.